All right, let's get into water. Do not be overwhelmed by everything that is on this table. This is absolutely not what you are going to need to get started with brewing. So please remember, as we go through this, I want to give you a warm and fuzzy that you can absolutely brew without understanding water chemistry. So there's an old saying when you start out brewing that if it's good to drink, it's good to brew with. And for all intents and purposes, when you're getting started, that is absolutely true. So if your tap water out of the sink is good, go ahead and brew with it. The reason understanding water is important is for repeatability, and there are certain characteristics that you can control by knowing what's in your water and controlling that with what we call brewing salts, or, well, they're essentially chemicals. So I'm gonna give you a primer on that. I will say this is one of those topics in brewing that people get really heated about. And so you can go down a rabbit trail or a rabbit hole on this all day long and spend all of your time, and people think that it is very important. Some people think it is not important. I'm gonna let you make that call for yourself. I will give you the starting points for what you need to know, and hopefully it will clarify a lot of the confusion that it comes around water chemistry. So let's get started. Essentially, there are three different options that you can take at the home brewing level, and you can tailor these also to your needs or whatever you've got. So the easiest and most simple way to collect water is to get your kitchen sink or your refrigerator filter and get the strike water that you need. The strike water is the water that's in the kettle that's at the temperature that you want it to be when you mash it. So it's as easy as that. Do not overthink it. If you have good water at home, you're good to go to start brewing. So the next step is to move up into filtered water. And so if you go to any one of the big companies that does not have to be Primo, you know, there's all the different companies, you can just exchange it, get 2 of these, and you are set for brew day. So for what, 10 bucks, you know you have really good water. And which leads me into why it's important to have consistency in your water. It's because if you want to remake a recipe, repeatability is going to require the same water. It is, after all, 90+% of the final product in beer. So if it tastes like a pool before you start, you're gonna taste pool in your final beer. So that's the basics. That is all you need to know if you are just getting started. Please, please, please don't worry about all of the next stuff that we're gonna talk about here. The next step up, so that was easy, medium, and now you get into a little bit more complicated. Building up from reverse osmosis. You may have an RO system in your house already, which sets you up perfect to do this. Essentially what you're doing is you are building the water profile for the specific kind of beer that you want with using chemicals. So an easy ballpark chemical addition or salts addition chart that I found is actually in the Anvil Foundry user manual. They line out, you want pale, hoppy, you want dark and stout. This is how much calcium chloride you add per gallon. This is how much gypsum or baking soda, whatever it is. It's kind of an easy go-to. That's not by any means fine-tuning a recipe, but it is a perfect way to start. And it's free. You just go to the Anvil website, get that instruction manual, and you're gonna get that little cheat sheet calendar. I did ask them if we could point that out, and they said yes. So the hard option or the advanced option is to build your brewing water up from reverse osmosis. These kits range, so basically we've got 3, some have 5 different filters ranging from charcoal to the sediment charge and all of the different things. It's just making reverse osmosis water. It's a blank slate. From that, you're gonna add the different stuff. And I'm gonna get into all of these different things in a second. So regardless of which water you're using, it's important to know what's in that water. If you want to control this variable more than just the taste test, does it taste good? There are different ways that you can get it. So the traditional one is to send a water sample off to a company like Ward Labs, for example. They will send you back a report. They actually send you a little empty vial. You fill it with the water that you're going to be using, and you send it back to them. They send you a report in your email that tells you this is how much salt, how much chloride, how much, all the different chemicals that are relevant to us. So knowing what's in your water is important. There's a downfall to this because at least where I'm at, the source of water at the city changes. And so it could be one thing at Christmas time, but then in the summer, it's pulling from a different well or a different source. And so the water is different. So it fluctuates throughout the year, and I kind of can't control that. I can request a water report from city, but it's usually a bit more vague than the Ward Labs one. And again, I don't know what time of year, which source they are listing on there. So that kind of takes me into an unknown land. And so just recently I've been using a cool kit. And so this is the Smart Brew water testing kit. We also have a self-contained Ward Lab. It looks like a chemistry kit. So it's got all the different samples and it walks you through step by step on how to get your water chemistry. So if you want to go down that road, it takes about 25 minutes to figure out exactly what's in your water, and then you're going to plug those numbers into your BrewFather or whatever software you're using to build your recipe and do that. I'm bringing these things up. Again, don't worry too much about this. You can go down the rabbit hole. You can read John Palmer and Kaminsky's book on water. I highly recommend this if you want to go nerd on your water. So again, repeatability and consistency and fine-tuning a recipe, that's when you need to get into water. Keep that front of mind. Yeah, so you do your water report, you figure out what's in it, you plug it into your brewing software, and that will spit out the report based on what kind of profile you select. If you were making a hoppy beer, you want it to have a certain combination of these. If you want a light lager that has no water flavor at all, it's gonna have a lot less or a different combination of these. And you let that software do it, and then you bust out your trusty scale, whichever one you want. This is a jeweler's scale that you can just get on Amazon. Put your cup on there, measure them out, and it's not much. It'll be like a teaspoon or two of one or each of these, or you just follow that software, trust it, and it will take care of you from there. So that is how salt additions are made. One note on that, when it comes to pH, when I first got started, it was highly recommended to have your wort at a certain pH or your water at a certain pH. And you can tell that using a simple pH meter. Again, get it on Amazon, More Beer, wherever you do your brewing shopping. And you find out that it's a bit high. And there's this product here. It's called 5.2 pH Stabilizer. This is mystery. I don't know what's in it. I don't use it anymore because I'm not really sure what it's doing to that brewing water, and I like more control than that. So I don't have to worry about this anymore because I am using RO and I build up, or filtered water if I haven't collected that RO the night before. So let's get started with the different things that are going to be on those water reports, or the different elements that we need to take into consideration as brewers. And the first one is pH and alkalinity. The reason pH is important is because it dictates some of the mouthfeel that's on the end, but most importantly, it maximizes, when you're between 5.2 and 5.6, it maximizes the amount of sugars and starches and all the good stuff that you want to pull out of the grains during the mashing process. Typically speaking, if your pH is too high, you can get an astringency or get those tannic flavors out of the husks. If it's too low, you can start getting into just some different off flavors. 5.2 to 5.6 is ideal, and you are on the money. You know that by using a pH meter. So you literally just dip the tip of this and it's gonna do the readout, and these can be calibrated and used. You do not have to get a high-end science lab version. You can if you want to. I use this, I'm pretty sure it was like 12 bucks on Amazon. So this is an important tool if you track your pH. Since I switched to reverse osmosis and I build up using chemical calculators, I don't even worry about pH anymore because I know that I'm consistently gonna be in the right range, so I do not worry about that. Alkalinity is expressed in parts per million on these reports, and it's basically going to dictate how much acid you need to get your water into the ideal range. All right, so the first salt that we're gonna talk about is calcium chloride. I'm gonna keep this very simple. This is what it looks like. It's kind of like little beads. This is how it comes for brewers. Basically, this is going to add both, you guessed it, calcium and chloride levels in your water. The next we're gonna talk about is gypsum. So gypsum is a very fine powder that comes out. As you see, it's trying to puff out of this bag. This has very little impact on the final flavor. But it does affect, say, clarity and yeast health. That is one of the primary reasons I use gypsum. This is actually calcium sulfate. I try to keep the levels for this in any beer over 100 parts per million, just to make sure that those two factors are taken care of. So keeping this simple, the third salt that we're gonna generally use in brewing is magnesium sulfate, which we also call baking soda. Higher levels of this in your beer is going to help bring out that bright pop out of the hops that we very much like for our hoppy styles. And so if you are like me and you enjoy that, mind the baking soda. Don't add too much though. It can have a diuretic effect. So again, use and trust those calculators. Don't just dump it in thinking that it's gonna, oh, make my hops super bright and poppy. Use the calculators, but baking soda is one of the 3 key salts that I use in my brewing. Next, the honorable mention goes to salt, basic NA. And so that is table salt. Some of the calculators are gonna call for it. Certain styles, say a Ghost, are gonna require salt. Follow the calculators again. According to the book, we are not to exceed 150 parts per million. This could also come in the form of baking soda or other things, but those calculators are gonna dictate which you want. But ultimately, salt is salt. Not technically a water salt to cure the final flavor is potassium metabisulfite. The reason this guy is important, you might also see it as Camden tablets. The reason this guy is important is because it can knock out chlorine out of your strike water. So the night before, if you're collecting water out of your tap, you put, it's literally like a 1/4 teaspoon is enough for a 5-gallon batch. Less is more. If you've got Camden tablets, it's a 1/4 of that Camden tablet for like a 10-gallon batch of water. So very important for that. I also use potassium metabisulfite in my cider making, and I'm pretty sure it's in wine kits as well. So very useful to have around. I do recommend picking some up if you are using tap water for brewing. So in summary, I hope that you are not overwhelmed or feeling overwhelmed by water chemistry, because you do not need to be. This is something that I got into after probably 200 or 300 batches of beer under my belt. I was using simple water filtered through a charcoal RV filter out of an RV hose. So the RV hose is not gonna transfer that green rubber hose that you get out of a regular hose. But it would go through a clean potable water hose through this charcoal filter and get the sediment out right into the kettle on brew day, and it worked out absolutely fine for me. I didn't even do the water tests until I was ready to start messing around with all of this other stuff. So let's summarize what you need to know. To get started, just go brew. Use your kitchen faucet sink. Use regular filtered water out of water bottles or these jugs. Do it, just keep it simple. Do not overthink it. Next, if you really want to get into it, I do highly recommend reading. You can go find a bunch of information online, upgrade to the charcoal filter if you want to, or if you have any kind of weird off flavors going on in your house water. Then and only then, once you are comfortable with all of the other variables, you can go ahead and get into RO, and that will help you fine tune some of the mouthfeel and flavor elements that you can use when you're doing your salts. This does require understanding of the brewing softwares that are available, Brewfather, Beersmith, whichever one you end up choosing. So it does add an element of complexity. However, it is rewarding once you understand it and you know your beer inside and out. I hope all of that makes sense. Go brew.